This video is best enjoyed during lunch, dinner, before bed, or when you need something in the background while studying or working. Now let's get started. The sun gradually rose above the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over the sky of Alexandria, Virginia. It seemed like an ordinary morning. Tree-lined streets, colonial-style houses standing still under a thin layer of mist, and the usual clean gravel paths. But today was not peaceful. Not for the Wilson family. Not for Sarah Wilson, a mother who had just lost her only daughter. And certainly not for Lucy, the loyal service dog of Jess, her steadfast companion through years of military service. The solemn atmosphere of the funeral was shattered by Lucy's relentless, fierce barking. An outcry brimming with unease, a defiant protest against what was happening. The dog stood guard by Jess's flag-draped coffin, its front legs slightly bent, sharp golden eyes radiating tension. It refused to move even for a second, allowing no one to approach the casket it seemingly refused to accept. The ground beneath its paws bore deep scratch marks, as if Lucy were trying to dig for something buried inside. Sarah stood still, hands gripping the hem of her coat, her heart heavy in her chest. When the military notified her of her daughter's death in a covert operation, she thought she could brace herself for the reality. But nothing could prepare a mother to bury her child. Pain was not unfamiliar to her. 20 years ago, she had lost her husband, Richard Wilson, in a classified mission whose full truth was never disclosed. And now history repeated itself. But this time something was wrong. Lucy never reacted this way. The dog had been trained to remain calm in the most extreme situations. It never barked without reason. It only responded so intensely when something contradicted what it had been conditioned to trust. Sarah silently scanned the crowd for a familiar face, but there was no sign of Ethan Carter. No indication that the young soldier had ever existed, even though he was the one person who should not be absent. Ethan and Jess had always been together, not just as comrades, but as something more, though they had never openly admitted it. Sarah knew, even if her daughter had never confirmed it, Ethan was the only one who could keep up with Jess on any mission. If Jess was gone, did that mean Ethan was too? The strange part was that there were no reports of Ethan's death, no records of him being injured or missing. His name was not on the casualty list. There was no news at all, as if he had never existed. Sarah turned to Michael Reed, a former investigator and Jess's childhood friend, whispering, "He didn't come." Ethan, he was always with Jess. Could it be? Michael shook his head, suspicion evident in his eyes. No reports on him, no casualty list, no missing persons file. He's just vanished. The word echoed in Sarah's mind, reinforcing the doubts she hadn't dared to confront. Vanished, just like Richard. No body, no trace, just a closed casket and a story fabricated by the military to appease the family. And if Ethan had disappeared with Jess, then who was behind all of this? Lucy barked again, more intensely this time, scratching the ground as if trying to convey something. A young female soldier stepped forward, perhaps intending to pull the dog away from the casket. But Lucy immediately growled, ears pricked, body tensed in a defensive stance. "She hasn't moved since the casket arrived," the soldier murmured to Michael. Lucy's eyes burned with absolute vigilance. The dog understood something that the humans did not. It sensed what everyone else was trying to ignore. This casket did not contain Jess. After the funeral, as the visitors gradually dispersed, Sarah and Michael drove home. They stepped into the old but well-maintained house where Sarah had single-handedly raised Jess after Richard's death. The moment they crossed the threshold, Lucy didn't enter as usual. Instead, she turned back to look at Sarah, then sprinted upstairs to Jess's room, scratching at the door. A tightness gripped Sarah's chest. This was the first time she had entered the room since Jess's passing. Everything remained just as Jess had left it, neat and orderly, as though she could walk back in at any moment. Sarah placed a hand on the bed, feeling her daughter's presence in every corner. But before grief could fully take hold, she heard Lucy's persistent scratching. Michael stood beside her, watching Lucy with curiosity. The dog sniffed around Jess's desk, lightly clawing at a stack of documents and photographs. It stopped at an old picture frame, then suddenly barked excitedly. No longer the mournful wails from the cemetery, no longer the fearful warning cries. This time, Lucy barked as if it had found something important. Sarah picked up the photo and felt her heart skip a beat. It was a picture of Jess and Ethan, clearly taken during a mission. Both of them in uniform, their faces streaked with dirt, but their smiles radiant. Ethan stood next to Jess, gripping his rifle with one hand, while the other rested lightly on Lucy. He was looking at Jess in the way only a man in love would. But the most striking detail was Lucy. The moment it saw the picture, it wagged its tail, barking as though recognizing a familiar scent. Sarah looked down at Lucy, then back at the photo. "Lucy?" she whispered. Lucy scratched at the picture again, eyes filled with anticipation. Michael frowned, his voice low. "She thinks Ethan is still alive." Sarah tightened her grip on the photo. If Ethan had died with Jess, why was Lucy reacting this way? And more importantly, why was Jess's casket empty? The room fell into an eerie silence after Lucy's excited reaction to the photo of Jess and Ethan. Sarah clutched the frame, her eyes fixed on her daughter's face, and beside her, Ethan. The man she had always suspected was more than just a teammate. She recalled the times Jess mentioned Ethan, always careful with her words but unable to hide the warmth in her gaze. Sarah had always wondered, but Jess had never confirmed it. Perhaps because military regulations forbade personal relationships within the unit. If discovered, they could be reassigned, losing their connection on the battlefield, where trust mattered more than anything. Sarah looked at Lucy. The dog persistently pawed at the photo, eyes gleaming as if it had uncovered something crucial. Michael, standing beside her, took the frame gently from her hands, flipped it over, and opened the stand. Inside, he found a small folded note. The handwriting was Jess's. "If anything happens to me, Lucy will lead the way." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Michael frowned at the note, then at Lucy. "Jess left a message," he murmured. "She knew she might be in danger." Lucy suddenly moved, nudging at one of Jess's desk drawers. The dog tried to pull it open but couldn't, whining in frustration. Sarah knelt down, slid the drawer open, and found a small silver tin box. It wasn't locked, just needed a gentle push. Inside was a military dog tag, not Jess's. Sarah lifted it, turning it in her fingers. The name engraved on it read, "Ethan Carter." No one spoke. Sarah felt her heart pounding. A cold chill ran down her spine. Michael broke the silence first. If Ethan had died with Jess, his tag should have been returned to his family. But instead, Jess hid it. His voice grew firmer. "That means he's still alive." Sarah gripped the tag tightly. A strange certainty settled over her. Not just hope, but conviction. Jess hadn't hidden it for sentimentality. She had hidden it for a reason. Lucy perked up, ears standing straight as if waiting for their next move. Sarah stroked the dog's head, thoughts racing. If Ethan is alive, why is there no report on him? She looked at Michael, expecting an answer. Michael didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out his phone and accessed military records through a private channel. As a former military investigator, he had ways of retrieving information that others couldn't. But after just a few minutes, his expression darkened. "This is impossible." Sarah stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. On the screen, Ethan's military records were completely blank. No death report, no missing person file, not even a recruitment history. "Nothing," Michael murmured. "No birth date, no unit assignment, no last mission. He's been erased." Sarah took a step back, feeling the ground shift beneath her. "How is that possible?" Michael's gaze turned sharp. "There are only two reasons someone vanishes from the military system. One, they went rogue, and the government is covering it up. Two," he didn't finish, but Sarah understood. "Two, Ethan was part of a top-secret mission the government wanted buried. Or worse, he had been captured by the same people who had made Jess disappear." Lucy whimpered, moving around the room as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere. She approached Sarah, nudging her hand gently with her muzzle, then looked up expectantly. Michael took a deep breath, looking at Sarah. "We can't just stand by. We need to find out what happened to Ethan and Jess." Sarah nodded. tightening her grip on Ethan's dog tag. It was time to dig deeper into the truth. Jess had left clues, and they would follow every trace. Lucy knew something, and she would lead the way. The hum of the car engine broke the silence between Sarah and Michael as they quietly drove through the streets of Alexandria. The sky was overcast, and a tense air hung over the city as if nature itself sensed that something was wrong. Sarah still clutched Ethan's dog tag in her hand, the cold metal pressing against her skin, a constant reminder that, no matter what, Ethan was not dead. No death records, no missing persons report, no trace proving Ethan had ever existed. He had been completely erased, and there could be only one reason for that. The government didn't want anyone to find him. Lucy sat in the back seat, but she was anything but relaxed. Her ears were perked, her body rigid, as if waiting for something to happen. She didn't take her eyes off the dog tag in Sarah's hand, her intelligent gaze flickering with suspicion. Sarah reached down to stroke the dog's head, but inside an unshakable unease was growing. If Ethan was still alive, why hadn't Jess returned? If they had disappeared together on their final mission? If Ethan was still out there somewhere, why was there no sign of Jess either? The question kept repeating in her mind, like a relentless tide eroding the belief that the military had told her the full truth. Michael suddenly made a sharp turn into a narrow street and pulled up in front of an old bar tucked away in a secluded corner of the city. The flickering neon sign barely illuminated the worn wooden facade. This was not a place for casual visitors. It was for retired soldiers or those burdened by a past they couldn't escape. Sarah glanced through the windshield and saw a man sitting in a dimly lit corner, holding a glass of beer but not drinking. He had a solid build, his buzz-cut hair streaked with gray, his face weathered by sun and war, the kind only those who had served would recognize. Daniel Brooks, a former teammate of Jess and Ethan. As Sarah and Michael stepped inside, Lucy followed silently. But the moment Daniel saw the dog, his expression changed. He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to believe what he was seeing. Sarah pulled out a chair and sat across from him, feeling the tension hanging over the table. Michael placed a photo of Jess and Ethan on the worn wooden surface.
We need to know what happened to them.
Daniel didn't respond right away. He looked down at the picture, then at Lucy, as if wrestling with himself over whether to speak. Finally, he exhaled heavily, his gaze weary.
I can't say much, but I can tell you this. They were never meant to come back.
His voice was hoarse, bitter, as if those words had haunted him for a long time. Sarah felt her pulse slow. What do you mean? Daniel lowered his voice, scanning the room to make sure no one was listening.
Ethan and Jess didn't die on a routine mission. They were sent into a classified operation called Phantom.
Both Sarah and Michael froze. Michael leaned in, his voice dropping.
What kind of operation?
Daniel shook his head, his expression dark.
I don't know much, but I do know this. Phantom isn't just a mission. It's a personnel control program. Anyone involved either disappears or becomes part of something far worse.
A chill ran down Sarah's spine.
Are you saying they were forced?
Daniel locked eyes with her.
I once overheard Ethan talking to an intelligence officer before their mission. I don't remember his name, but I remember Ethan's tone. He didn't trust him. And looking back, I think they walked straight into a trap without knowing it.
Michael ran a hand through his hair, tension tightening his features.
Do you remember anything else?
Daniel hesitated, then pulled a small slip of paper from his jacket pocket. He scribbled down a name before sliding it across the table.
There's only one person who might know more about Phantom, General Robert Anderson.
Sarah's heart clenched. General Anderson wasn't just a high-ranking military figure. He had worked with Richard, her husband, before he disappeared, and now he was linked to Jess. Michael picked up the paper, staring at the name for a long moment before nodding.
Thanks, Brooks.
Daniel shook his head.
I just hope you find the truth before it's too late.
As they left the bar, Sarah remained silent, staring out the window. By the time they arrived at the military security headquarters, where General Anderson worked, dusk had settled. They were escorted to a small room where the man who had once held immense influence in the military was waiting. He was no longer in uniform, but his presence was as commanding as ever. Lucy remained still, neither barking nor reacting, but her eyes tracked Anderson's every move. Sarah placed Ethan's dog tag on the table.
We want to know about Phantom.
General Anderson looked at the dog tag, then at Sarah before exhaling slowly.
I assume you already know too much.
Sarah clenched her jaw.
We only know that Jess and Ethan were sent on a mission they never returned from, and now Ethan has been erased from military records. We want to know why.
Anderson was silent for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the door, and locked it before returning to his seat.
Phantom isn't just a mission.
He said, his voice low.
It's a system of control, a secret military program designed to recruit the best operatives and turn them into absolute assets. Those who don't fit the mold are eliminated.
Sarah's heart pounded.
And Jess didn't fit?
Anderson stared at her.
She uncovered the truth.
Michael narrowed his eyes.
What about Ethan?
Anderson hesitated before nodding slowly.
If Ethan is still alive, then it's likely he's now one of them. And if that's the case?
A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine.
Then what?
Anderson held her gaze.
Then Ethan is no longer the man you once knew.
The sound of tires crunching over dry gravel broke the tense silence as Sarah and Michael pulled up to an old weapons depot, once a staging ground for Jess's special operations. From the outside, the warehouse looked abandoned, its faded gray paint peeling, rusted metal sheets catching the dim evening light. Weeds crept along the walls, swallowing the remnants of what had once been an active military site, a place long forgotten, or perhaps deliberately erased. Lucy leaped from the car the moment the door opened. She stood still for a few seconds, ears perked, scanning the area with sharp eyes, analyzing her surroundings. Then suddenly she barked, short, precise, and sprinted toward the main entrance. Michael and Sarah followed immediately. Sarah's heart jolted as she saw Lucy take a deep breath, her eyes flickering with recognition. This wasn't just a reaction born of habit or suspicion. Lucy was certain. She had caught a familiar scent. Lucy circled the warehouse door, her claws scratching at the rusted metal, growling softly. Sarah pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The lock was old, but clearly not untouched. Michael knelt, inspecting it, before pulling out a multi-tool. Within seconds, the lock snapped open with a dry click. The heavy door creaked as they pushed inside. The air was colder than expected, carrying the scent of old gunpowder and metal. Dim light from high windows illuminated crates, dust-covered weapons, and a steel locker tucked in the corner. Lucy headed straight for it. Whatever was inside, it mattered. Lucy immediately moved toward the steel cabinet. She stopped in front of the heavy metal door, took a deep breath, then let out a low whine, her claws scratching against the surface as if trying to pry it open. Michael and Sarah exchanged a look. They didn't need words to know that whatever was inside was important. Michael pulled hard on the cabinet door, but it was locked. Sarah scanned the room, searching for a key or anything that could open it. Then she noticed a small piece of paper wedged in the gap above the cabinet, yellowed with time. She pulled it out, unfolded it with a growing sense of unease, and her heart sank the moment she recognized the handwriting. Ethan. The writing was hurried but firm, as if written in distress. Sarah read it aloud.
If we're compromised, remember the code 0914. Lucy will understand.
The room fell into silence. Michael frowned at Lucy, then turned back to Sarah.
What is code 0914?
Sarah shook her head.
I don't know. But if Ethan left this message, it means he knew Lucy would find it.
Michael took a deep breath, then looked down at the dog.
Lucy. 0914.
Lucy reacted instantly. She stepped back, then leapt up, pushing forcefully against the cabinet door with her front paws, just like a trained detection dog signaling an important discovery. Without hesitation, Michael entered the code into a small electronic keypad on the cabinet door. 1 second, 2 seconds. Beep! The lock clicked open. Inside there was a letter, a handgun, and a fully loaded magazine. Sarah immediately grabbed the letter, unfolded it, and this time, there was no doubt. It was a direct message from Ethan. Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't make it back on my own. I don't have time to explain everything, but Jess and I were sent on a mission with no way out. I tried to escape, but they knew. They've been watching us every second. We uncovered something they never wanted anyone to know, and we paid the price. But there's still a chance. I've hidden crucial information in an old military base. If you want the truth, go there. It's located north of the city, beyond the residential area. The coordinates are encoded on a USB drive inside the bottom drawer of this cabinet. If you find Jess first, protect her at all costs. If you find me first, make sure I'm no longer a pawn in their plans. 0914 is not just a code. It's the last day Jess and I were free, and it's the day we lost our right to choose. Sarah's hands trembled as she folded the letter. Michael had already retrieved the USB drive from the drawer and plugged it into his laptop. A map flashed onto the screen, marking an old military installation in the northern outskirts, a few hours' drive away. "This is where we need to go," Michael said, his voice cold as he stared at the screen. Sarah nodded. The fear was gone, replaced by unwavering determination. Ethan had left them a chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. Lucy stood up, lightly tapping her tail against Sarah's leg, as if sensing that their journey was far from over. It had only just begun. Darkness settled as Sarah's car rumbled along the rugged road leading to the abandoned military base Ethan had mentioned. On the map, it was just a rundown training site, decommissioned years ago. But no military facility was ever truly abandoned. If Ethan was being held here, then there were still guards inside, and possibly something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Michael gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his voice low with caution. "I don't believe this place is just abandoned. If Phantom is still active, this could be one of their hidden outposts." Sarah glanced at the USB still plugged into Michael's laptop, displaying the facility's layout. "How many entry points?" Michael typed quickly. 3 main entrances, but all are likely monitored. The best approach is through the southern tunnel. It's not marked on official maps, but old bases like this always have emergency escape routes. General Anderson, who had joined their mission the moment they reached out to him, was checking his weapon. Once a powerful figure in the military, today he wasn't here as a commander. He was here to seek justice for what had been hidden for too long. If Ethan is still alive, we can't leave him there any longer. He may have critical intel Phantom is trying to extract. Sarah gripped the small pistol in her hands. She wasn't a soldier, but she was a mother, and she would not let anyone else control her daughter's fate ever again. When the car rolled to a stop at a safe distance, Lucy leaped out first. But instead of rushing into the base like an ordinary dog, she remained still, sniffing the air, ears pricked. She stopped right in front of the southern tunnel entrance, pressing her nose against a narrow gap between 2 concrete slabs. Within seconds, she let out a low, warning growl. Sarah took a deep breath. She senses something. Michael checked his weapon, then crouched down, gently pushing against the concrete slab. As expected, it wasn't sealed completely. A narrow passage appeared, leading down into the darkness beneath the facility. Anderson motioned for them to go first before silently closing the slab behind them. The underground space was damp and suffocating, the beam of Michael's small flashlight sweeping over the aged walls. Lucy led the way, but she was no longer moving quickly. She was deliberate, stopping at intervals as if warning them that someone could be nearby. Just minutes after entering the deeper part of the base, Lucy suddenly froze, her entire body tensed, fur bristling. She didn't bark, but her sharp golden eyes locked onto a massive steel door at the end of the dark hallway. Sarah's throat went dry. Ethan is in there. Michael inspected the lock on the door, then shook his head. Electronic security system. We'll need time to bypass it. Anderson didn't hesitate. He pulled out an electronic jammer and plugged it directly into the lock. A small click sounded, the red light on the keypad turning green. The door released with a sharp metallic clank before slowly swinging open. The dim light inside forced Sarah to squint as her eyes adjusted. The room was cold and nearly empty, but in the center, a man was bound to a chair, heavy chains around his wrists, eyes shut. His face was gaunt, bruises covering his arms and jaw. Despite his worn state, she recognized him instantly. "Ethan!" Sarah rushed forward, but Michael held her back. "Wait, we don't know what he's been through." Lucy didn't wait. The dog darted to Ethan's side, letting out a low whimper before nudging his leg with her muzzle. Ethan groaned softly, his head lolling forward before his eyes fluttered open. And the moment he saw Lucy, clarity returned to his gaze. His voice was hoarse, weak, but filled with astonishment. "Lucy?" Sarah hurried to unchain him, tears welling in her eyes. "We're here to get you out." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but as he moved, a sharp pain made him grit his teeth. "No, we can't." He lifted his head, urgency flashing in his eyes. "They took Jess." Sarah froze. "What?" Ethan stared straight at her, his voice strained with desperation. "She's alive, but they're forcing her to work for them. They've put her on a mission, one where if she fails, they'll kill her immediately." Michael cursed under his breath. Anderson clenched his fists. Sarah felt the world tilt around her. "We have to find Jess before it's too late." Ethan nodded, pain evident in his body but determination burning in his eyes. "I have intel, but we need to move now. If we don't, they'll know I escaped." Lucy let out a low growl, her gaze locked on the hallway outside. There was no time left. Michael helped Ethan to his feet, Sarah grasped his arm, and Anderson took the lead. They vanished into the darkness, carrying with them a horrifying truth they had never anticipated. Jess was alive, but she was a pawn in Phantom's game, and they had only one chance to bring her back. The atmosphere in the car grew heavy after the group left the abandoned military base, where they had found Ethan imprisoned in a state of exhaustion. Outside the window, the darkness weighed down on the empty roads, with only the headlights stretching across the pitch-black asphalt. Sarah sat in the front seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly, even though she wasn't the one driving. Michael was at the wheel, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror to make sure they weren't being followed. Ethan sat in the back, his body still aching from weeks of torture and interrogation, but his mind was razor sharp. He knew they didn't have much time. They had escaped, but that also meant their enemies knew they were on the move. Lucy lay close to Ethan, but she wasn't relaxed. The German Shepherd was no longer barking or whining. Instead, she was tense, her eyes locked onto Ethan as if waiting for something. Finally, Sarah broke the silence, her voice dry. "You said Jess is still alive." Ethan looked up, his eyes flashing with both pain and determination. "Yes, but we don't have much time." He took a deep breath, as if trying to ease the pain from his wounds. "After we were captured, Jess and I were separated immediately. I don't know what they did to her in the first few days, but I do know they didn't kill her. Instead, they forced her into a top-secret weapons experiment." Michael frowned, his gaze locking onto Ethan through the rearview mirror. "What do you mean?" Ethan clenched his jaw, his expression darkening. "Phantom isn't just an organization running covert missions. They've developed a biological weapon capable of temporary memory erasure and behavioral control. They want to use it to create the perfect agents, soldiers without memories, without free will, obeying only orders." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "And they chose Jess?" Ethan nodded slowly. She was one of the best. Memory, combat skills, tactical analysis. She was too valuable to waste. They wanted to turn her into an unstoppable assassin, a puppet under their control. Michael tightened his grip on the wheel, his jaw clenched. Then, how do you know she's still herself, that they haven't already turned her? Ethan closed his eyes for a second, as if recalling something. When he opened them, his gaze was resolute. Because before they took her away, Jess sent me a message. Sarah's heart jumped in her chest. What did she say? Ethan's voice dropped, each word etched deeply in his mind. She told me that if I ever got the chance to escape, I had to find Lucy and her mother because she knew they were the only ones who could save her. No one spoke for a few seconds. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. But it wasn't fear. It was a truth she had long ignored. Jess had known that she would be the only one who could pull her back from the abyss. Suddenly, Lucy let out a low growl. The dog had been silent since they got into the car. But the moment Ethan spoke those words, she reacted. She turned, eyes locked onto Ethan, ears standing tall, then lunged forward, biting at the chain still wrapped around his wrists, a remnant from when they had cut him free from Phantom's shackles. Sarah startled. Lucy! But Lucy didn't stop. She bit down hard, pulling at the chain with her entire body, growling with frustration. She understood. She knew her owner was still alive, and she wanted to be led to Jess immediately. Ethan looked at the dog, then reached out, gently touching her head. I know, he whispered. I want to find her too. Sarah took a deep breath, then turned to Michael. We need to move now. Michael nodded, pressing the gas pedal harder. So where do we start? Ethan braced himself against the seat, his eyes dark with urgency. We have the coordinates to one of Phantom's facilities from the USB, but if they've put Jess into the memory control program, they won't keep her somewhere easy to find. Sarah was silent for a moment. She was a former intelligence analyst, and right now, everything in her mind was clicking into place. Phantom wanted control over people. They were testing biological weapons. They needed a secure place to hide all of this. She turned sharply, locking eyes with Ethan. They wouldn't keep her in a standard military base. Ethan nodded. Exactly. Michael glanced over. Then, where? Sarah closed her eyes, piecing together every clue in her mind. A secret facility, untraceable, close enough for transport but far enough to avoid suspicion. Then she opened her eyes and spoke slowly. They're keeping her in a mobile lab. Ethan sat up straight. You mean? Sarah looked at him directly. We had a similar program back when I was in intelligence. These facilities don't stay in one place. They're mobile research units, moving from location to avoid detection. Michael exhaled sharply. That means we're chasing a ghost. Sarah shook her head. Number, if Jess knew we were coming, she would have left a trail. Ethan clenched his fists. Then we follow that trail. Michael nodded, pressing harder on the accelerator. Lucy let out a quiet whimper, as if she was ready too. Sarah gripped her hands tightly, her eyes locked on the dark road ahead. She had lost her husband to a military secret. She had lost her daughter to those who manipulated the truth. But this time, she wouldn't let Jess be controlled. She would bring her daughter back, even if she had to destroy Phantom to do it. The night thickened as the car sped down the empty road, headlights slicing through the cold darkness. No one spoke, but the tension in the car was suffocating. Sarah sat in the front seat, her eyes focused on the GPS map on her phone screen. Michael kept a steady speed, his sharp gaze occasionally flicking toward Ethan in the back seat. Ethan sat by the window, his hands clenched on his knees. His body still ached from his wounds, but his mind was racing against time. Beside him, Lucy sat upright, ears perked, fully alert, as if she understood what was happening. Ethan reached out, gently stroking the dog's head, a gesture the two had shared for years. Lucy tilted her head toward him as if waiting for a command. Ethan took a deep breath. If anyone could lead them to Jess, it was Lucy. He leaned in, his voice low and firm. Not a normal command, but one only Lucy and Jess understood. Lucy, sembilan ratus empat belas, find. The moment the words left Ethan's lips, Lucy sprang up. Her eyes flickered with recognition, and she was no longer still. She turned, sniffing the air deeply, then suddenly lunged at the window, paused scratching the door as if demanding to be let out immediately. Michael flinched. What the hell? Sarah looked at Lucy, then turned to Ethan. What did you just say to her? Ethan didn't take his eyes off Lucy. Code 0914. Jess trained her to recognize that number. Sarah suddenly remembered the paper she had found in the weapons cache. Jess had left that number as a clue, and if Lucy recognized it, that meant Jess had been here. Michael immediately turned the wheel, slowing down. She's leading us. Lucy didn't hesitate. She stared out the window, ears locked forward in complete focus. She knew the way. Sarah checked the map. We're heading toward the abandoned military zone. If Jess was brought through here, there's a chance something remains. Michael glanced at Ethan through the mirror. You sure about this? Ethan nodded. If Jess left this code, she wanted us to find it. Lucy whined, then suddenly lunged toward the door. To the left, Ethan shouted. Michael swerved onto a rough dirt road leading to an old building hidden among large trees. It looked like an abandoned office, its windows covered in dust. But something felt off. Sarah could sense it. Lucy wasted no time. The moment the car stopped, she bolted out, racing toward the door. Ethan followed, with Michael and Sarah drawing their weapons, scanning the area. No guards in sight, but that didn't mean they were safe. Lucy halted at a heavy metal door. A dusty keypad lay beside it. Sarah's breath caught as she noticed 4 worn-out keys. 0914. This is it, she whispered. Ethan stepped forward, crouching down next to Lucy. The dog looked up at him, eyes full of expectation. Ethan's heart ached for Jess, his determination to rescue her unwavering. He put his hand on the door, then looked at Michael. Can you hack it? Michael quickly opened his toolkit, pulling out a small device and attaching it to the electronic keypad. The screen flickered for a few seconds before emitting a small beep. Michael's expertise with technology was a valuable asset, his ability to bypass security systems honed from years of experience. The door opened. No one said anything. They just looked at each other, then quickly drew their guns and stepped inside. They moved cautiously, their senses on high alert. The space inside was dark and dirty, but it didn't feel completely abandoned. Sarah looked around, then bent down to pick up something that had fallen on the floor. A torn piece of fabric with dried blood. Sarah's stomach churned at the sight of the blood, a clear indication that violence had taken place. Michael saw it, his eyes darkening. We're not the first ones here. Michael's expression turned grim, his mind racing to assess the situation. Lucy suddenly growled, then ran quickly deeper inside. Lucy's instincts were on high alert, sensing danger lurking in the shadows. Ethan chased after it, his heart pounding as Lucy stopped before an old desk, claws scratching hard at the bottom drawer. Ethan's anxiety grew with each passing second, his fear for Jess intensifying. Sarah opened the drawer and immediately her breath caught in her throat. Inside there was a broken phone, the screen completely smashed, but the memory card was still intact. The sight of the broken phone sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, a stark reminder of the violence that Jess had endured. Ethan picked it up, his hand trembling. This is Jess's. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Michael quickly took a memory card reader, attaching it to the laptop. The screen lit up, displaying a series of data files. But what made the group freeze was an interrupted audio recording, only a few seconds long. The laptop screen flickered to life, displaying a series of data files and a single audio recording. Jess's voice rang out, weak but full of determination. The sound of her voice sent a surge of hope through Sarah's heart. a sign that Jess was still fighting. If anyone finds this, I'm being taken away. They won't stop. I have to. Stop it. Stop, Phantom. Don't trust them. The audio recording cut off abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. The room fell silent. Sarah felt a coldness run down her spine. The temperature seemed to drop, a tangible representation of the darkness that surrounded them. Ethan clenched his fist. She's still fighting. Ethan's voice was filled with determination, his resolve to rescue Jess unwavering. Michael looked at the data on the screen. I have the last coordinates of the phone before it was turned off. Michael's expertise with technology was a valuable asset, his ability to extract information from damaged devices, a crucial skill. Sarah didn't hesitate for another second. We go now! Lucy barked once, as if it knew they were closer to Jess than ever before. There was no turning back now. Jess was still alive, and they wouldn't lose her again. They had come too far to give up, their determination fueled by their love for Jess. Phantom's base loomed before their eyes, a military complex hidden in a desolate valley, surrounded by towering mountains. The base was a stark reminder of the power and resources that Phantom possessed. Even though there were no signs from the outside, Sarah knew that the inside wasn't abandoned. On the contrary, it was operating for a purpose that the government never wanted anyone to know. Sarah knew that they were walking into a dangerous situation, but they had no choice. Michael stopped the car about a kilometer from the base, turning off the engine and observing with binoculars. Michael's caution was a necessary restraint, his years of experience teaching him to be wary of appearances. No signs of patrols outside. Either they're too confident or they know we're coming. Michael's voice was low, his senses on high alert. Ethan checked his weapon, his voice lowering. They know. Ethan's expression turned grim, his mind racing to anticipate their enemy's next move. Sarah looked at Anderson. Do you think Jess is really here? Sarah's anxiety was palpable, her fear for Jess's safety growing with each passing moment. General Anderson, who had once worked for the system they were now fighting against, pondered for a moment before nodding. If we followed the data trail from Jess's broken phone, then this is where she last appeared. And if Phantom is still conducting biological weapons experiments, they won't abandon an important subject like her. Anderson's knowledge of Phantom's operations was invaluable, his insights providing them with a crucial advantage. Lucy, still sitting quietly in the car since they stopped, suddenly raised its head, ears perked up, eyes vigilant. It sniffed the air, then growled softly. Lucy's senses were on high alert, sensing danger lurking in the shadows. Ethan glanced at the dog. We need to get in quickly before something happens. Ethan's urgency was evident in his voice, his fear for Jess's safety growing with each passing second. The group proceeded along the narrow trail, avoiding the security cameras that Michael had identified beforehand. Lucy moved without making a sound, quietly sneaking ahead, leading the way with its keen sense of smell. The dog's movements were fluid and graceful, its instincts guiding it through the darkness. Ethan kept one hand on his gun, his eyes not leaving the distant buildings. Ethan's senses were on high alert, his mind racing to anticipate their enemy's next move. Finally, they approached a large steel door at the rear of the complex. Michael quickly connected the lock-breaking device to the panel next to it, while Sarah and Anderson watched around, ready to respond if they were discovered. Michael's fingers flew across the keypad, his expertise with technology a valuable asset. It only took a few seconds before the door beeped softly and opened. Go, Michael signaled, and they quietly slipped inside. The door swung open with a soft hiss, revealing a dark and ominous hallway. The hallway inside was dark and cold, the flickering fluorescent lights reflecting off the shiny steel. There were no guards. The silence was unsettling, a clear indication that they were walking into a trap. Ethan squinted, a feeling of unease rising within him. Ethan's instincts told him that something was wrong, that they were being watched. Sarah walked to a control panel on the wall, opening the base schematic data. Her eyes were fixed on a laboratory located in the center of the base, in a particularly heavily guarded room. Sarah's analytical mind worked quickly, piecing together the available information. She pointed at it. "Jess is here." Ethan nodded, but as they prepared to move forward, a voice rang out from the loudspeaker, the voice of a man Ethan recognized immediately. The voice was cold and calculating, a clear indication that they were dealing with a ruthless enemy. "We've been waiting for you." The group froze. The lights on the ceiling turned on brightly, and the steel door behind them slammed shut with a deafening bang. The sudden burst of light and the sound of the door slamming shut sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. It was a trap. From two side corridors, phantom soldiers appeared, rifles in hand, moving in an organized manner. The soldiers were heavily armed and well-trained, their movements precise and efficient. Michael cursed. "Damn it! We've been compromised!" Michael's voice was filled with frustration, his anger barely contained. Ethan clenched his fist. Standing in front of the soldiers was a familiar man, Colonel Richards, the traitor who had captured them. Richards' betrayal was a deep wound, his actions unforgivable. Richards smiled faintly. "Frankly, I'm surprised to see you get this far without being eliminated along the way." He turned to Ethan, his eyes sharp. "You're as stubborn as ever, Carter." Richard's gaze was cold and calculating, his eyes devoid of any emotion. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "And you're as cowardly as ever, Richards." Ethan's voice was filled with contempt for the traitor. Richards sneered. "You think you came here to rescue your little lover? You're too late." Richards' words were a blow to the gut, filling Ethan with a surge of rage. Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat. "Where's Jess?" Richards tilted his head, pretending to think. "Oh, she's very busy. We found a perfect way to utilize her talents." Richards' tone was mocking, his words a clear attempt to provoke Ethan. Sarah tightened her hand into a fist. "What have you done to my daughter, you bastards?" Sarah's voice was filled with rage, her anger barely contained. Richards turned to her, his smile becoming colder than ever. "You'll see soon enough." Richard's smile sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, a premonition of the horrors that lay ahead. Michael was the first to act. He drew his gun and opened fire, ducking to dodge bullets while Anderson also raised his weapon, firing back. Michael's reflexes were sharp, his aim precise. Ethan lunged forward, aiming straight at Richards, but as he prepared to pull the trigger, he pulled out a combat knife and lunged. Ethan's focus narrowed, his determination to stop Richards unwavering. The two men wrestled violently in the middle of the hallway, punching, kicking, twisting to dodge each other's lethal blows. Ethan quickly slammed Richards to the floor, but the traitorous colonel resisted fiercely. The fight was brutal and unforgiving, each man determined to win. Meanwhile, Sarah was avoiding a phantom agent who was lunging at her. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she fought to defend herself. Lucy jumped in front, growling fiercely, then leaping straight at the attacker, taking him down with a powerful bite to the arm. He screamed, trying to pull away, but Lucy didn't let go. It continued to attack, creating an opportunity for Sarah to retreat. Lucy's loyalty was unwavering, its ferocity a testament to its training. Michael fired, taking down two soldiers, then saw Ethan still fighting with Richards. "Ethan!" Michael's voice was filled with urgency, his concern for his friend evident. Ethan turned, locking Richards' arm, slamming him to the ground. But before he could finish the fight, a voice rang out over the loudspeaker, making everyone freeze. The voice was familiar, sending a chill down their spines. "Ethan?" It was Jess. Ethan stopped dead. "Jess?" The loudspeaker echoed in the hallway, her voice sounding unstable. Jess's voice was weak and distorted, a clear sign that she was in distress. "Don't look for me. Get out of here." Sarah felt the world collapse beneath her feet. Sarah's heart ached for her daughter, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Ethan shook his head, his heart pounding. No, we came to take you home. But Jess's voice was colder than ever. I don't need saving. I'm a part of Phantom now. The room fell into a deadly silence. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of their ragged breaths. Ethan felt like he had just been punched straight in the chest. It couldn't be happening. Ethan refused to believe that Jess had been lost to them forever. Richards laughed, even though he was injured. That's right, Carter. She's not the person you knew anymore. Richards' words were like a knife twisting in Ethan's heart. Ethan looked towards the loudspeaker, his voice trembling. Jess, that's not you. I know that. But only silence answered him. Lucy growled softly, its eyes full of vigilance and pain. Lucy seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, its loyalty to Jess unwavering. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to keep her spirits up. Sarah knew that they couldn't give up, that they had to keep fighting for Jess. Michael looked around, then turned to Ethan. We can't stay here long, but I don't believe that she's completely changed. Michael's voice was filled with determination, his belief in Jess unwavering. Ethan clenched his fist, his eyes flashing with unprecedented determination. He would find Jess. He would bring her back. Ethan's love for Jess was his driving force, his resolve unbreakable. They would find Jess. They would bring her back. By any means necessary, they were prepared to face any obstacle, to make any sacrifice, to save Jess from the clutches of Phantom. Inside the Phantom base, the atmosphere was heavy like a storm before it hits. The hallway was cold, the red lights flickering, signaling a security system in alert mode. The footsteps of Phantom agents rang out in the distance. But Sarah's group had gone deep inside without being discovered. The Phantom base was a labyrinth of corridors and laboratories, a testament to the organization's power and resources. Ethan, Michael, Sarah, and Anderson moved quickly, following the direction of the data they had just decoded from the system. Jess was here, and they couldn't lose her again. The weight of their mission pressed down on them, their determination fueled by their love for Jess. Lucy went first, its nose touching the floor, sharp eyes scanning the space. It knew exactly what it was looking for. Lucy's senses were on high alert, its instincts guiding it through the darkness. Finally, they stood before a thick metal door with a large, bold inscription above it. Research room, restricted access. Ethan lunged forward, pounding hard on the control panel. Jess is here. Michael quickly connected his lock-breaking device to the system. It will take about 30 seconds. Ethan couldn't wait any longer. He slammed on the door, calling loudly. Jess, are you in there? There was no answer. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the machinery within. Sarah gripped her gun, a feeling of unease rising. If Phantom had really brainwashed Jess, they might be facing a completely different person. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Michael entered the last code into the system. Beep. The door opened, and the group quickly stepped inside. The door swung open with a soft hiss, revealing a scene that would forever be etched in their memories. The room was vast, covered by cold white light. In the middle of the room was a laboratory chair, with a woman sitting on it, her hands bound tightly by thick metal wires. It was Jess, but she wasn't looking at them. Jess was still wearing her military uniform, but her eyes were empty, her skin pale under the fluorescent light. Small sensors were attached to her temples, connected to a device displaying complex numbers and brainwaves. Jess looked like a shell of her former self, her spirit broken. Ethan felt his heart tighten. Jess? She didn't react. Ethan slowly moved forward, but as soon as he was only a few feet away, Jess raised her head, her eyes as cold as ice. Jess's eyes were devoid of any emotion, her expression blank and unreadable. Who are you? Ethan stopped dead. Sarah tightened her hand. It can't be. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. Jess tilted her head, her eyes showing no sign of recognizing anyone. "Who are you people?" Michael breathed out. "Damn it! They have manipulated her." Michael's frustration was evident in his voice, his anger barely contained. Ethan stepped forward, his voice lowering. "Jess, it's me. It's Ethan." But she didn't react. Sarah felt her heartache. Jess was right in front of them, but she wasn't herself anymore. The sight of Jess in that condition was almost unbearable. Lucy, who had been standing silently, suddenly moved closer. The dog's golden eyes stared intently at Jess, as if it was also struggling to understand what was happening. Lucy seemed to sense that something was wrong, its instincts urging it to act. Then suddenly, Lucy barked, not a normal bark, but a special command, the command that only Jess had ever taught it. "Lucy! 0914. As soon as she heard those numbers, Jess's body stiffened. The numbers seemed to trigger something within her, a dormant memory struggling to surface. Her eyes blinked rapidly, her breath becoming rapid. Jess's body trembled, as if she were fighting against an invisible force. Sarah saw it immediately. She whispered, "It's triggering her memory." Ethan held his breath, staring at Jess intently. "Jess?" Jess put her hands on her head as if she was fighting with something. She mumbled, her voice trembling. 0914? 0914? Lucy stepped forward, then made a small sound, a soft whimper, like it was calling its owner. Lucy's whimper was a plea for recognition, a desperate attempt to reach Jess. Jess opened her eyes. Her eyes were no longer lifeless. They started to flicker. Jess's eyes began to flicker with a hint of recognition, a spark of the person she once was. Ethan moved closer. He bent down, gently putting his hand on hers, his voice choking. Ethan's voice trembled with emotion, his love for Jess unwavering. "We never leave each other. Remember?" Jess froze. That sentence, that was the sentence that Ethan and Jess had sworn to each other in the unit, in the most dangerous missions. The sentence that they had never forgotten, even when imprisoned, even when tortured. The words were a lifeline, a reminder of the bond they shared. And at that moment, a tear rolled down Jess's cheek. The tear was a sign that Jess was still in there, that her spirit hadn't been completely broken. Ethan squeezed her hand tighter. "You remember, don't you?" Jess trembled. She looked at Ethan, and for the first time, her eyes showed real pain. "Ethan!" Sarah held her breath. Ethan smiled even though his eyes were wet. "That's right, it's me." Lucy whined softly, then jumped on Jess's lap, tail wagging constantly as if it had found its real owner again. Lucy's joy was palpable, its tail wagging furiously. Jess looked at the dog, then back at the people around her. She bit her lip, her hands clenching together, as if trying to find herself again amidst a jumble of chaotic memories. Jess's eyes darted around the room, searching for a familiar face, an anchor in the storm of confusion. Ethan didn't let go of her hand. He bent down, his voice barely a whisper. "You never belonged to Phantom. You've always been Jess, and now you have to come back to us." Ethan's voice was gentle and reassuring, his words a lifeline in the sea of uncertainty. Another tear fell. Jess's tears were a sign that the real her was still in there, fighting to break free. Jess nodded weakly. A faint smile touched Jess's lips, a glimmer of hope in her weary eyes. Sarah covered her mouth, choking back a sob. Sarah's heart ached for her daughter, her emotions a mixture of relief and overwhelming joy. Ethan breathed out, feeling as if the world had just been lifted off his shoulders. Ethan's relief was palpable. The weight of his responsibility finally lifted. All right, he squeezed her hand. We're getting you out of here. Ethan's voice was filled with determination, his resolve to protect Jess unwavering. Michael checked his weapon, looking out into the hallway. I hate to be a party pooper, but it looks like we're about to have a lot of trouble. Michael's pragmatism was a necessary counterpoint to the emotional intensity of the moment. The group turned, and at that moment, an ear-splitting alarm rang out. The alarm was a clear indication that their presence had been detected, that they were no longer operating in the shadows. Lucy growled. Lucy's growl was a warning, a signal that danger was imminent. Sarah drew her gun. Sarah's hand was steady, her determination unwavering. Ethan squeezed Jess's hand. Can you fight? Ethan's voice was filled with concern, his priority Jess's safety. Jess took a deep breath, her eyes flashing with the familiar fire of a warrior. Jess's eyes hardened with determination, the warrior spirit within her rekindled. She looked at Ethan, then nodded. Always ready. Jess's voice was firm, her resolve unwavering. Ethan smiled. Ethan's smile was a mixture of relief and admiration, his love for Jess shining through. The real fight had only just begun. The battle for Jess's soul, the fight against Phantom's control, was far from over. The alarm blared throughout the Phantom base, red lights flashing brightly, signaling that the intrusion had been detected. Rushing footsteps echoed through the metal hallways, Phantom agents rushing with weapons at the ready. The Phantom agents were a formidable force, their training and discipline a clear indication of their dedication. Ethan squeezed Jess's hand, his eyes quickly scanning the situation around them. We don't have much time. Ethan knew that they had to move quickly, that every second counted. Jess nodded, her breathing still not completely steady after regaining her memory, but there was no longer any hesitation in her eyes. Jess's eyes were clear and focused, her determination unwavering. Sarah checked her gun, standing close to Michael and Anderson. We have one choice. Either we fight or none of us get out of here. Sarah's voice was filled with resolve, her determination to protect her daughter unwavering. Michael narrowed his eyes, looking down the hallway. I think we just made our choice. Michael's pragmatism was a necessary counterpoint to the emotional intensity of the moment. The Phantom soldiers had appeared. No one waited. Ethan and Jess lunged into the attack first, aiming to take down the closest enemies. Ethan and Jess moved with a speed and precision that belied the chaos of the situation. Jess moved as fast as a ghost, each shot of hers perfectly accurate, her assassin skills still intact, even though she had been brainwashed for weeks. Jess's training had been deeply ingrained, her instincts honed to a razor's edge. Ethan supported her from behind, covering her every advance. The two coordinated perfectly, as if they had never been apart. Ethan and Jess moved as one, their movements fluid and synchronized. Sarah shot down a Phantom agent who was trying to approach Jess from behind. She looked at her daughter, her heart swelling with pride and pain. Jess had endured too much suffering, but she was still an unconquerable warrior. Sarah's love for her daughter was a powerful force, driving her to protect her at all costs. Michael and Anderson held the rear, firing to impede the advance of the Phantom soldiers flooding in from the other hallways. Michael and Anderson were a formidable team, their years of experience in combat making them a force to be reckoned with. Lucy lunged to bite a Phantom agent's leg, causing him to fall before Jess finished him with a neat shot. Lucy's loyalty was unwavering, its instincts guiding it to protect its comrades. Everything was happening too fast, but their group was slowly gaining control of the situation. Despite the chaos, Their group was working together seamlessly, their skills complementing each other perfectly. As the group approached the central control area, the room door suddenly slammed shut. The metal door slammed shut with a deafening bang, cutting them off from their escape route. A squad of phantom soldiers appeared from both sides, surrounding them in the narrow hallway. The soldiers were heavily armed and well-trained, their movements precise and coordinated. A phantom agent threw a stun grenade, emitting a brilliant white light. Jess lost her balance, falling, and immediately a soldier grabbed her, pinning her to the floor. The stun grenade momentarily disoriented the group, creating an opportunity for the enemy to strike. Ethan saw that scene, not hesitating for a second. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, his instincts urging him to protect Jess at all costs. He lunged like a storm, knocking the soldier down and punching him hard in the face. He collapsed, but another immediately raised his gun, aiming straight at Jess. Ethan's movements were swift and decisive, his training taking over. Without thinking, Ethan threw himself in front of Jess. Ethan's selflessness was a testament to his love for Jess, his willingness to sacrifice everything for her. Bang! The bullet tore through his shoulder, blood splattering. But Ethan didn't stop. He took down the attacker with a lethal shot before turning back, pulling Jess to her feet. Ethan's pain was immense, but he refused to let it slow him down. Jess's eyes widened, staring at him. Ethan. Jess's voice was filled with shock and concern, her eyes searching his for signs of pain. He smiled slightly, even though the wound was bleeding. I told you, we never leave each other. Ethan's words were a reminder of the bond they shared, a bond that had been tested but never broken. Jess couldn't hold back anymore. She took his face in her hands, pulling him in and planting a deep, fierce kiss on his lips amidst the chaotic scene of battle. Jess's kiss was a declaration of her love, a reaffirmation of their connection. Sarah glanced at Michael, then looked away, clearing her throat. Could you two pick a different time? Sarah's attempt at humor was a way to lighten the mood, to break the tension of the moment. Michael smirked. I think this is the perfect time. Michael's words were a testament to his belief in Ethan and Jess's love, his support for their relationship unwavering. Suddenly, Lucy barked decisively, the bark signaling target acquisition. Lucy's bark was a clear indication that it had detected something important, its senses on high alert. Sarah turned to look at the dog. What is it, Lucy? Lucy growled, then lunged towards the hallway on the right, scratching hard at a steel wall. Lucy's growl was a warning, its actions guiding them towards their next objective. Ethan looked at it, then recognized a secret door opening, leading down to an underground passage. Ethan realized that someone was trying to escape, that they were running out of time. Jess frowned. Someone is trying to escape. Jess's instincts told her that they needed to stop whoever was fleeing. Michael checked the security system, then cursed. It's Parker. He activated the base's self-destruct mode. Michael's voice was filled with urgency, his words a clear indication of the danger they faced. Sarah held her breath. We can't let him escape. Sarah knew that Parker held the key to Phantom's secrets, that they couldn't let him get away. Ethan nodded, turning to Jess. Ready? Jess cocked her gun. Always. Jess's voice was firm, her determination unwavering. They plunged down the underground passage, Lucy running ahead, following Parker's scent. The passage was dark and cramped, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. Finally, they came to a small room with an escape tunnel, and Parker was standing there, about to step into the armored vehicle to escape. Parker's escape was a clear indication of his desperation, his willingness to do anything to avoid capture. Parker turned around, his eyes flashing with anger and despair. "You can't stop me." Parker's voice was filled with defiance, but his eyes betrayed his fear. Sarah took a step forward. "On the contrary, we can." Sarah's voice was filled with resolve, her determination to bring Parker to justice unwavering. Parker drew his gun, but before he could fire, Lucy lunged. Parker's attempt to escape was thwarted by Lucy's quick actions, its loyalty unwavering. The dog attacked straight at his arm, making the gun fall to the floor. Jess and Ethan simultaneously raised their guns, aiming straight at his head. Jess and Ethan's movements were swift and coordinated, their training taking over. Parker stopped, realizing he was out of options. Parker's face was a mask of fury and defeat, his dreams of escape shattered. Michael stepped forward, holding out handcuffs. "The game is over, Parker." Parker roared with anger, but couldn't do anything else. He had been caught. Parker's capture was a victory, a sign that their efforts had not been in vain. When the group returned to the central control area, Anderson had deactivated the base's self-destruct command. The data about Phantom had been backed up. The successful extraction of the data was a testament to their teamwork and skill, their efforts ensuring that Phantom's secrets would be exposed. The surviving agents were arrested and Phantom's system was completely wiped out. Phantom's reign of terror had finally come to an end, their power and influence extinguished. Sarah looked around, feeling the weight of 20 years of struggle finally being lifted. Sarah's heart was filled with a sense of peace and closure, the long years of struggle finally coming to an end. Ethan put his hand on Jess's shoulder. "We finished it." Jess took a deep breath, looking at those who had controlled her being handcuffed, looking at Lucy raising its head proudly, looking at the mother that she had thought she would never see again. Jess's eyes were filled with gratitude and love, her heart overflowing with emotion. She smiled for the first time in years. Jess's smile was radiant, a symbol of her newfound freedom. "Yes, and now we can go home." Lucy wagged its tail, barking clearly. Lucy's bark was a celebration, a joyful sound that echoed through the room. Sarah hugged her daughter, tears of happiness flowing. Ethan and Jess squeezed each other's hands, feeling like a new chapter had opened, a chapter with no more fear, no more control. Sarah's embrace was a symbol of her love and support, her unwavering commitment to her daughter's happiness. Michael smiled slightly. "Well, now we only have one problem." Ethan raised his eyebrows. "What is it?" Michael patted him on the shoulder. "You're injured, and I bet Jess won't let you rest for a minute." Michael's words were a light-hearted attempt to break the tension, to remind them that even in the midst of chaos, there was still room for humor. Jess smiled mischievously. "That's for sure." They walked out of the base, leaving the past behind them. They stepped out into the night, leaving behind the darkness and embracing the promise of a brighter future. The final battle had ended, but their real life had only just begun. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. 4 months after the final battle, the courtroom was packed. Press, military, government officials, all were present to witness the largest trial in military history. The courtroom was filled with anticipation, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of the events that had led to this moment. In the middle of the room, Parker and Colonel Richards sat behind the defendant's table, handcuffed. The two faces that had once been powerful, cold now looked haggard and bitter, but their eyes still filled with hatred. Parker and Richards were shadows of their former selves. their power and influence stripped away. Sarah, Ethan, Jess, Michael, and Anderson were all present, sitting in the front row, looking straight at those who had ruined their lives. They sat together, a united front against the darkness that had threatened to consume them. The judge banged his gavel. "We begin the trial for acts of treason, conspiracy to overthrow the government, and war crimes." The judge's words were formal and somber, setting the tone for the proceedings. One by one, the evidence was presented. Phantom's secret documents, testimonies from the victims who had been turned into war tools, the audio recordings that Jess had left before being captured. The evidence was damning, painting a clear picture of Phantom's crimes. Ethan raised his head to look at Parker. In his eyes, there was no more hatred, but rather steadfastness and compassion. Ethan's heart was filled with compassion, even for those who had wronged him. Jess squeezed her mother's hand. She had survived, had won herself back, and today she was here to see justice be served. Jess's presence was a testament to her strength and resilience, her determination to reclaim her life. It was Jess's turn to take the stand to testify. She took a deep breath, her eyes steadfastly looking straight at the jury. Jess's voice was clear and strong, her words filled with conviction. "I am no longer a manipulated agent. I am no longer their tool. They tried to brainwash me, tried to turn me into a puppet, but I remembered, and I fought to get myself back. Today I stand here to say that these men didn't just betray their country, they betrayed the soldiers who once trusted them." Jess's testimony was powerful and moving, her words resonating with everyone in the courtroom. The room fell silent for a moment before applause rang out. The applause was a sign of support and admiration, a recognition of Jess's courage and strength. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. The defendants, Parker and Colonel Richards, are sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. All of Phantom's assets and resources will be seized. The case is closed. The judge's words were final, bringing an end to the long and arduous legal battle. The gavel banging echoed throughout the courtroom. Sarah closed her eyes, letting a tear fall, not because of sadness, but because of the relief after waiting 20 years for justice. Sarah's tears were a mixture of relief and gratitude. The weight of the past finally lifted. Jess turned to Ethan. "We really finished it." Ethan smiled. "Yes, and this time, no one can take away our future." Ethan's smile was radiant, his eyes filled with love and hope. After the trial, an honoring ceremony took place at the military base. Ethan and Jess were awarded medals of honor, recognizing their courage and sacrifice in exposing Phantom. Ethan and Jess were hailed as heroes, their bravery and selflessness inspiring others. Sarah, standing in the crowd, proudly watched her daughter receive the medal, knowing that finally Jess had found her way again. Sarah's heart swelled with pride as she watched her daughter receive the recognition she deserved. And Lucy, the silent hero of the story, was awarded the title Military Hero, with a special medal for helping destroy Phantom and saving her comrades. Lucy's bravery and loyalty were recognized, its actions saving countless lives. Ethan bent down, whispering into Lucy's ear, "Good job, girl." Lucy wagged its tail, cocking its head as if it knew that it had made a great contribution. Lucy's tail wagged with pride, its eyes shining with intelligence and affection. Sarah looked up at the sky. All that she had lost, all that she had struggled for, had finally found a worthwhile end. Sarah's heart was filled with a sense of peace and closure, knowing that her family had finally found their way back to each other. 6 months after the trial, the first reunion dinner after many years took place in Sarah's small, cozy home. Sarah's home was filled with warmth and laughter, a haven from the darkness of the past. On the dining table, a feast full of all the dishes that their family used to love: Sarah's lasagna, red wine that Anderson brought, and a large plate of special food for Lucy. The table was set with love and care, a symbol of their reunion and their commitment to a brighter future. Ethan and Jess were officially together, no longer having to hide their love after so many years apart. Ethan and Jess's love was a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring power of the human heart. Michael poured the wine, raising his glass. "Let's drink to a new beginning." Everyone clinked their glasses together. The sound of the glasses clinking together was a celebration of their survival, their resilience, and their unwavering bond. Sarah looked around the table, seeing all the people she loved were here, safe, happy. Sarah's heart overflowed with joy, her gaze sweeping over the faces of her loved ones. Lucy lay by Jess's feet, eyes half closed. For the first time in many years, it could truly relax. Lucy's presence was a constant source of comfort, its loyalty a reminder of the unwavering bond between humans and animals. Jess squeezed Ethan's hand, looking deeply into his eyes. "We lost each other for too long." Jess's voice was filled with emotion, her eyes shining with love. Ethan smiled, bending down to plant a light kiss on her forehead. "Now we won't let that happen again." Ethan's touch was gentle and reassuring, his love for Jess a promise of a brighter future. Sarah smiled, looking at her daughter and Ethan, looking at the close friends around her. Finally, after all, they had found each other. Sarah's heart was filled with gratitude, knowing that they had finally found their way back to each other. Outside, the night sky was still, the stars twinkling like promises of a bright future. The stars twinkled like diamonds in the sky, a symbol of hope and promise. Lucy opened its eyes, wagging its tail lightly, as if it also understood that their story had finally had a complete ending. Lucy's tail wagged with contentment, its eyes shining with intelligence and affection. Family, love, justice, and a new beginning. Their journey had been long and arduous, but they had finally reached their destination.